All manipulation starts the same way, with an invisible seed planted inside you. It's not a direct attack, it's a subtle, almost elegant move that makes you doubt your own judgment. The manipulator doesn't order you, he leads you. He doesn't raise his voice, he changes his tone. He doesn't lie clearly, he distorts little by little until reality starts to revolve around him. That's how the emotional games that most wear down human beings are born. You start confident, certain of what you think and feel, but over time you start walking on eggshells, calculating every word, avoiding every confrontation. The person says they love you, but blames you for everything. Says they want what's best for you, but makes you feel wrong all the time. And when you try to react, you seem like the villain of the story. Manipulators are artists of an invisible theater. They rehearse the lines, study your tone of voice, notice where you give in, where you hesitate, where you seek approval. They don't want your love, they want your axis, because an unbalanced human being is easy to control. And that's exactly why the first step to dealing with manipulators isn't about them. It's about you, about rebuilding the center they're trying to steal. Imagine a calm person, but who lives with someone who always provokes them, with sarcasm, with irony, with jokes that hurt. At first, they react. Then, they start to keep quiet. Until, one day, they realize they're no longer living. They're just avoiding explosions. That's the result of any emotional manipulation. You stop acting to start defending yourself. Epictetus said that no one is free who depends on the mood of others. And that's the essence of this video, learning not to depend emotionally on those who feed on your reaction. What you're going to see here is a journey of 6 levels, a map to get out of the emotional war zone and back to the center of your own peace. In level 1, you'll understand why reacting is the first mistake. In level 2, you'll learn to see the game without getting confused by it. In level 3, you'll discover the power of the pause and the mirror. In level 4, you'll understand how simple questions disarm complex minds. In level 5, you'll learn to establish boundaries that impose themselves without needing to threaten. And in level 6, you'll see the maximum point, when the manipulator no longer finds access, because you've become inviolable. This video isn't about beating anyone. It's about winning the game that makes you lose control. And in the end, maybe you'll realize that true power was never about speaking louder, but about not reacting to the noise. Before we start, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. This helps me continue producing videos like this. And tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this message is reaching. Now yes, let's start the path of internal control. The first level is the most difficult because it shows how much we are still slaves to our own reactions. Level 1, the reactive, triggered. Every manipulator starts from the same point, your reaction. He doesn't need to convince you of anything. He just needs to throw you off balance. When you lose your center, he takes control. It's an invisible but precise game. He says something he knows will hurt you, observes your expression, and measures how much you lose your balance. From there, he conducts you as a maestro conducts the orchestra. The first level is that of impulsiveness. You react quickly, loudly, with emotion. You explain, defend yourself, shout, cry, and think you're asserting yourself. But in reality, you're giving away energy. Manipulation needs fuel, and the fuel is always your emotional response. Whoever reacts too much isn't controlling the game. They're participating in it under the command of the other. Think of a relationship where someone provokes you on purpose. An acidic comment, a comparison disguised as a joke. You respond immediately, trying to explain yourself. The manipulator smiles, satisfied. He made you spend energy. And from there, the topic of conversation is no longer what he did, it's what you said after. You become the focus. The manipulator loves to reverse roles, and nothing facilitates this as much as your emotional explosion. Or imagine a work environment. A colleague launches a criticism in public, in a mocking tone. You get irritated, try to rebut right there, and what was an isolated provocation turns into a scene. The manipulator won, not because he was right, but because you lost your silence. And losing your silence is losing command. Epictetus said that no one can offend you without your cooperation. This is the first truth that man needs to understand at this level. Provocation only works when it finds an open emotional gap. The reactive lives in this cycle. He feels, responds, regrets. He spends the day mentally repeating what he should have said. He carries the other's words as if they were knives that need to be returned. But true mastery begins when he understands that not reacting is different from being silent. Not reacting is choosing the terrain. It's saying in silence, I decide when and how I respond. The manipulator expects chaos. He wants to see the flushed face, the altered voice, the restless body, because all this proves that he managed to control you. But when you maintain a firm gaze and a neutral tone, he gets lost. The game loses its appeal, and the power he thought he had evaporates into the air. Deep down, the reactive is a good man. He's just too quick to realize he's being played. His emotion is real, but the timing is wrong. And what he needs to learn to move to the next level is to recover the time between the stimulus and the response. That interval is where all freedom resides. The second level starts right there, in the moment when you stop just feeling and start observing. It's when chaos still tries to call you, but this time you recognize the pattern, you see the trick, and the simple act of naming what's happening completely changes the game. Level 2, the observer, label the tactic. In the second level, the game changes. The manipulator still tries to provoke, but something different happens. You start to see the trick. And seeing the trick is the first step to breaking the spell. The observer doesn't react, he analyzes. While the other speaks, he notices the patterns, the tone that changes, the words that are repeated, the gaze that seeks guilt. He begins to notice that all manipulation follows a script, and that the more predictable the script, the easier it is to escape it. It's like watching a play for the second time. You already know the ending, and therefore you're no longer moved by the drama. Manipulation lives on emotional confusion, but when you name what's happening, it loses strength, because what is named ceases to be a shadow. Think of a couple arguing. She says, "You don't even care about me." He, instead of justifying himself, calmly responds, "Are you trying to make me feel guilty to get what you want?" The phrase changes the whole game. It brings the trick to light. The manipulator needs darkness, and clarity disarms him. Or imagine a boss who lives playing colleagues against each other. He insinuates, distorts, provokes rivalry. But one day someone faces him and says, without anger, only with awareness, "You're trying to put me against him, right?" The phrase isn't an accusation, it's a statement of fact. And that's exactly what the manipulative mind fears most, being seen. Seneca said that nothing weakens evil as much as exposure. And the exposure in this case is emotional. It's the naked awareness of what's happening. When you can see the mechanism, it stops dominating you. Because emotional control doesn't come from strength, it comes from clarity. The observer begins to notice the tactics, the victimhood, the punitive silence, the strategic praise, the forced tone of innocence. He no longer automatically falls into the traps, because now he knows how to name the pattern. And naming is like turning on a flashlight inside a dark room. What seemed big and scary reveals itself to be small and pathetic. This awareness changes the posture. You no longer need to argue, prove, or convince, just see. And this just is already half the victory. From here, the manipulator will still try the same game, but what used to make you react now only makes you observe with distance. You start to see the speeches as attempts and not as truths. And this distance is liberating. But seeing isn't enough. It's still necessary to control the body, because the manipulator doesn't just read words, he reads the face, the tone, the breathing. And that's what you're going to learn in the next level, the power of the mirror and the pause. The moment when silence starts to become your greatest weapon. Level 3, the calm mirror, mirror and pause. The third level is the turning point. It's the moment when the manipulator still tries the game, but for the first time, he sees his own reflection. And that reflection is you. The calm mirror doesn't react, doesn't accuse, doesn't explain. It only returns the energy received without absorbing it. The manipulator launches the provocation expecting emotion, but finds a neutral look, a pause, a silence. And it's in this silence that manipulation begins to die. Think of a dialogue in which someone tries to pressure you. "So, you mean you don't care about me?" The natural impulse would be to explain, but the calm mirror just breathes, observes, and responds. Is that what you feel? The inversion is instantaneous. Whoever was attacking before now sees himself exposed. The power changes sides, not by force but by presence. This level isn't about winning discussions, it's about not losing energy in them. The manipulator depends on movement. When everything around him remains still, he falls apart. The silence forces him to confront his own incoherence. Imagine a boss who tries to provoke fear in the employee's eyes. He raises his tone, launches vague criticisms, expects submission. But the employee maintains a serene face, responds with pauses, speaks only what is necessary. The boss starts to get lost because the power he exercised was in the other's emotion, and now it no longer exists. Calm becomes uncomfortable for those who live on chaos. Seneca said that the greatest response to offense is indifference. This is the philosophy of this level. Serenity is the mirror that returns to the other what he himself projects. In the beginning, silence seems strange. You feel like justifying, defending, filling the void. But the void is precisely what frees you. Because the manipulator doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't waver. He loses the map, and what was previously psychological dominance turns into embarrassment. The calm mirror is the man who recovers the rhythm of his own breathing. He's not cold, he's centered. He understands that silence isn't absence of response, it's delayed response. And in this delay, everything changes. The emotion that was going to explode turns into awareness. The anger turns into reading, and respect is born from the space he creates between the stimulus and the reaction. When the manipulator realizes that he no longer controls your frequency, he changes his strategy. He starts to try the path of doubt, the game of confusion, of vague phrases, of hidden intentions. And that's where the fourth level arises, the moment when you respond with questions, direct, objective, disconcerting. Level 4, the questioner. Ask for specifics. The fourth level is where the manipulator begins to lose control. Until now, he fed on your silence, your emotion, your hesitation. But now, he is forced to deal with something he doesn't know how to manipulate: clarity. The questioner doesn't accept half words. He doesn't enter the emotional fog where the manipulator hides. Instead of reacting, he asks for details. Instead of accepting vague guilt, he demands facts. This is where the psychological game falls apart, because the lie always reveals itself when it needs to be explained. Imagine a conversation in which someone launches a generic accusation. "You've been different with me." Before, you would justify yourself, explain, open your heart. Now the questioner just says, "What exactly makes you think that?" The person feels the blow. The trick loses strength because the air of manipulation is ambiguity, and you just remove the oxygen. Another scenario. A friend tells you something loaded with disguised guilt. "After everything I've done for you, is this how you treat me?" The response of the man who has reached this level is serene and objective. What exactly do you think I did? Without anger, without irony, just focus. The phrase shines light where there was shadow before, and the light always destroys the emotional theater. Seneca said that the truth is simple and deceit needs ornaments, and this phrase summarizes this stage. Manipulation survives on flourishes, insinuations, and tones. But when you ask for clarity, when you force the other to say what he really wants, the game collapses. The questioner doesn't provoke, he brings it to the concrete. And the concrete is a terrain where manipulation doesn't know how to walk. Clarity is the language of emotional maturity. Whoever speaks with clarity isn't afraid of conflict because he understands that conflict isn't born from the truth. It's born from the lack of it. This level requires courage because it's easier to be silent than to ask for explanations. But every healthy relationship needs to go through this filter, that of direct communication. And that's exactly what the manipulator avoids. He wants you to feel, not to think. He wants you to react, not to ask. Therefore, when you start to ask, he becomes uncomfortable. The power that was his before becomes yours, because now he's the one who needs to explain himself. And it's here that the game changes direction. Manipulation without emotional food begins to dissolve, but there's still one last test, the limit. Because seeing and understanding the game isn't enough. It's necessary to delimit how far it can go. The next level is that of the limiter, the man who defines with serenity the lines that can no longer be crossed. Level 5, the limiter, boundary plus consequence. The fifth level is the moment when the manipulator understands, even without hearing a word, that free access is over. Until now, he was testing your tone, your patience, your guilt, your need for approval. But now, for the first time, he finds a wall. Not an aggressive wall, not a scream, but a firm, almost unbreakable presence. The limiter is the man who has finally learned to protect himself without justifying himself. He knows how to say no without turning it into an argument. He understands that respect isn't demanded, it's built by the limit. The manipulator hates limits because they prevent him from using affection as a tool of control. But the limiter doesn't negotiate what is essential: his peace, his time, his dignity. Think of someone who always asks you for favors, always demands understanding, always has a ready excuse. You used to say yes to avoid conflict. But now you simply say, I can't, and you remain silent, without explanation, without guilt. Manipulation dies there because it fed on your fear of seeming cold. Another example, a family member who invades your emotional space with veiled criticisms. I only say this because I care about you. Before, you would try to explain, defend yourself, justify. Now you respond with serenity. I appreciate your concern, but I don't accept that kind of comment. Simple, direct, and behind the calm, an invisible line that will no longer be crossed. Marcus Aurelius said that no one respects you more than you allow yourself to be disrespected. And this is the truth of this level. Respect doesn't come from anger. It comes from clarity about what you no longer tolerate. The limiter understands that each no is a brick in the wall of his own integrity. He doesn't shout, he doesn't need a threat, he doesn't need a speech. Because his authority is in his behavior. The people around feel the difference. The way he looks, how he responds, how he ends. There's no hatred, there's structure. And structure is something that the manipulator doesn't know how to break. This level is liberating, but it requires emotional firmness. The manipulator will test the limits, will try to provoke guilt, will try to make you seem too harsh. But the limiter knows that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. He chooses self-care, even if it displeases those who benefited from his weakness. When the limit is established, true respect is born, and with it comes something even more powerful, the definitive emotional distance. It's not escape, it's self-preservation. It's the last stage of psychological freedom, the moment when the manipulator not only loses control, but loses access. Level 6. The inaccessible, no access policy. Reaching the 6th level is like closing a door from the inside and discovering that the noise of the world stays outside. Here, the manipulator still tries to knock, still sends subtle messages, disguised provocations, old memories. But there's no one to answer anymore. Because the man who becomes inaccessible is no longer the same one who once reacted. He changed frequency. Being inaccessible isn't disappearing. It's not being emotionally available to those who drained you. It's answering with education, but not with surrender. It's responding without getting involved. It's being present but untouchable. The manipulator feels this change. He tries the old tricks, the guilt, the praise, the victimization, but nothing works. Because now there's an invisible filter between his intention and your center. Think of a woman who always used crying as a form of control. Before, just a tear was enough and you would bend over. Now you just observe with serenity and respond. I understand what you feel, but that doesn't change what I decided. There's no anger, there's no defense, there's peace. And this peace is more powerful than any reaction. Or imagine an old friend who comes back after months of silence, asking for one more chance. You listen to him, but inside you already know that the story no longer belongs to you. You don't need to prove that you've overcome. The simple fact of not feeling the need to justify is the proof. The manipulator wants emotion. You offer awareness, and awareness is the language he doesn't speak. Epictetus said that no one dominates you when you have nothing more to lose inside. Being inaccessible is exactly that, not allowing the other's voice to have power over your internal state. It's when your peace becomes a sacred territory and you no longer give keys to those who didn't know how to respect the door. The inaccessible doesn't cut ties out of anger, but out of lucidity. He understands that life doesn't need dramatic endings, just silent decisions. Sometimes the true end isn't what is said, but what ceases to be fed. And all manipulation starves when the food, your attention, ceases to be served. The man who arrives here realizes something profound. Freedom isn't noisy. It's the silence after the manipulator's last attempt. The silence in which you take a deep breath and realize that no one else has power over your mood. And it's in that instant that victory happens. Not with applause, but with serenity. The next block concludes this journey. It's the moment to look back and realize that the enemy was never the other person. It was the reflection inside you that still reacted. When that reflection dies, true mastery is born. At the end of this journey, the man realizes that the manipulator was never a real enemy. He was just a teacher in disguise, a mirror that showed, through pain, where there were still gaps in his mind. The first level revealed the lack of control, the haste to react. The second, the clarity to see the game. The third, the power of the pause. The fourth, the strength of the question. The fifth, the dignity of the limit. And the sixth, the serenity of someone who no longer needs to close doors because he no longer leaves windows open. It's a process of silent refinement. At each level, less drama, less explanation, less need to prove, until the man discovers what strength really means, the ability to remain whole when the other tries to break you. Seneca said that whoever masters himself cannot be mastered by anyone. And that's exactly it. The final power isn't in identifying manipulators, but in no longer being manipulable. And this only happens when the mind stops reacting and starts observing with distance, when calm becomes instinct, when respect for oneself becomes automatic. Being invulnerable isn't being cold, it's being whole. It's being able to feel without drowning, listen without absorbing, see without reacting. It's living with compassion, but without letting compassion become permission. It's loving without getting lost, helping without emptying oneself, being available without being vulnerable. Think of the difference. Before, you were the rough sea. Each provocation generated waves. Now you are the deep ocean. Nothing on the surface shakes you. The winds pass, but the bottom remains still. It's this depth that the manipulator can't reach. The silence of the invulnerable isn't empty. It's presence. It's the kind of silence that makes the other rethink his own noise, and it's in it that the purest respect is born, the one that doesn't need to be demanded, because it's naturally felt. The man who arrives here doesn't seek revenge or applause. He just continues in peace. He learned that not every person who hurts him deserves a response. Some deserve only absence, and that true power isn't in being feared, but in being untouched. If this video helped you see something in yourself, be sure to subscribe to the channel and comment on what you thought of the video. Remember, there is no greater victory than recovering your own axis, and there is no deeper defeat than living at the mercy of the emotions of others. Until the next video.